Resources, inspiring interviews, business practices, and practical advice to take your art career to the next level. Join Sergio Gomez in today's Artist Next Level and get ready to take control of your career.
Well, hello, my Next Level friends. I want to welcome you one more time to the Artist Next Level podcast. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If you have listened to us before, I invite you to give us a review in iTunes. That is one way in which you can help us to get this podcast to a lot more people. And my friends, today I want to share with you an awesome conversation I had with Laura Thurston. Laura Thurston studied dance at Northern Dance Theater of Northern Illinois University and at the Dance Center of Columbia College here in Chicago, where she graduated with a BA in dance performance. She independently co-produces Still Inspired and is honored to produce the show's fourth installment here in this beautiful city of Chicago, where she can share artistic visions with other dance and visual creators and provide opportunities to artists and dancers alike through this incredible project, which we're going to talk about in this podcast here today. And I'm so excited to introduce to you Laura Thurston. Hi, Laura. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Are you ready to take us to the next level?
I am definitely ready to take us to the next level.
Awesome. Laura, I want to welcome you right into the Art Next Level podcast. It is really an interview I've been looking forward to. And one of the reasons is because usually in this podcast, I interview either artists or curators or some other type of art professional. And today we have a quite nice opportunity to chat with you. You are a choreographer, you're a dancer, but you have a special interest in working with artists, special interest with visual art. And so that's why I thought it would be really great to have a conversation with you. And also, on the side too, because we are doing a project together coming up the first weekend of February. So we will talk about that as well, and combining art and dance and music and lights and all that good stuff. So I'm super excited to have you here. Welcome to the Art Next Level podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited. This is my first podcast ever. So
awesome. I think you will be great. As we get started, I always like to have a little bit of background information on everybody. Just kind of tell us whatever you want to highlight of, your growing up. I don't know if you grew up in Chicago or somewhere else. You are right now based in Chicago, but tell us a little bit about you grew up and more importantly, how you got interested in dancing.
Sure. Well, I grew up in the western suburbs of Chicago, two specific areas, St. Charles and Geneva, which happen to be right next to each other. It's out in the Tri-Cities area. And my interest in dance actually came as a very, very young child. My parents were able to put me in dance actually at the age of 2. So it's something that I guess you could say, since I could never remember, it's something that I studied and I did. So my brother and sister growing up, I'm the youngest of 3, they were both in dance as well. So usually you don't start it as early as to at least where I was from. So it was something that they saw me become very interested in as a toddler. And they asked the teacher if it was okay if I join a class at a younger age. This is so I'm told. So obviously I don't remember any of this. So I was able to start at a very young age. So like I said, it's something that I don't really ever remember living without. And I think many dancers can say that they are in the same boat. Usually you start very young, and it's something that takes years and years of training to become classically trained. And not that every dancer has to become classically trained, but it is something that young dancers do get thrust into at young ages. Children, anywhere between the ages of 5 and 8 can be when you start really working on your dance technique. So growing up in the western suburbs, I took from a few different schools out in that area. When it became time to figure out what to do with going to college, I took a few different routes to try to figure it out, because I also grew up heavily influenced by music. My parents were pretty great in making sure that art was a big part of all 3 of our lives, my brother, my sister, and I. So music and for sort of our primary resources. So I studied dance, I studied guitar, and I studied piano. So once I really figured out that even though I had dance training and I had music training in my background, I figured out that dance was something I wanted to go towards. So I went to Northern Illinois University for the first 2.5 years of my college career. And I ended up transferring downtown to Columbia College, Chicago, which is where I got my BA in dance performance in 2005. Transferred from DeKalb to Chicago. Reason being is I felt like I needed to sort of be in a more urban area with more connections to the dance world in and of itself. So that was sort of my journey to deciding to be a dancer. And from then, I did get some opportunities to dance in some Chicago professional companies in my 20s. And Still Inspired then started the idea was born in 2012. First show was produced in 2013.
Tell me a little bit about, Still Inspired. Let's first talk about what is it. And then, we can go back a little bit about, where it comes from. So how would you describe what is Still Inspired?
Still Inspired is it's a dance performance that we produce basically with the idea that we're going to find a visual artist that all 4 choreographers, because there are 4 dance choreographers involved with the show, are going to be inspired from to create a dance piece. So Still Inspired, it also questions our societal view of art as an outlet for creation. That's kind of, the play off of words, I guess you would say, for the title of our show, with how fast-paced and all of the technology that we have access to. And, art is this creative outlet that, after a while you kind of start to question, are we going away from that? Is that something that people can still be inspired by? So, it's a show that we put out there so that outlet still does exist. And, many other people do that as well. But that's basically what it is. It's dance performance inspired by visual art.
That's awesome. And this is an idea that you started, right? So how was it for you, when you kind of thought about this and then putting together that first team, that first year? Did you go looking for specific people that you had in mind in terms of the choreographers? And then how did you go about selecting your first artist?
Sure. So I actually co-produced the show with a longtime friend of mine that grew up as children together out in the western suburbs here. Her name is Lisa Skurlock. And Lisa and I ended up sitting down together over coffee in 2012.
Right. That's how a lot of things...
Right.
So that's how a lot of good things start. Yeah.
Exactly. A cup of coffee is a good way to get conversation going. So we were both retired dancers at that point, and we both felt this huge connection to dance still. It's very hard to walk away from. And I think every retired dancer can relate to this idea, because you only move for so long before, you do. For example, for me, I became a mother. So, there's only so long that you do it for many dancers. And I envy the ones that can continue to get into the 40s and 50s and even 60s. And it's great. We were sitting together as retired 30-something-year-old dancers. We discussed the idea of collaboration and how important it is to keep arts a collaborative effort, trying to just stay within the realm of dance. While it's very important, we thought it would be even more interesting to see if we can connect to other art forms to create a show of at least 2 different genres. And this is not a new idea. People collaborate all the time.
Right.
But
exactly.
Both Lisa and I grew up in music as well as dance. So music and dance already seem to go hand in hand. And I think most dancers, if not all, just automatically have a love for visual art. And, we do something similar to visual artists in terms of looking at a blank space and figuring out how you're going to express what it is that you want to express and create something within that blank space. And we do that with dancers, with costumes, with lights, visual artists. You do that with paint or with sculpting or with other outlets that you use to create your work. So it's actually very similar. So when we started discussing the idea of visual arts, we both just kind of clicked and said, that's it. That's what we want to do. And this way we can try to also collaborate audiences and find more visual arts audiences having a newfound respect for dance and vice versa, having dance audience have a newfound respect for visual arts, which I think is very important to just keep spreading the awareness of arts in general.
It's really wonderful idea, I think, what you have done and what you have achieved of, putting together this kind of conversation, right, that happens not only in terms of the choreographer looking at the work of art, interpreting that image into some at emotional level too through the performance, but also extending that conversation to the viewer, to the person that comes in to see the performance, where now that's another level there of meaning, that another layer of meaning that's added to that whole conversation. And that's why I find your project quite fascinating too, because that conversations keep going and continue to happen even after the performance. I'm sure people go back home and these are memories that they remember, or they talk about what they experienced, what they saw, and I think that is pretty cool. What has been over the last 4 years some of the comments that you have heard from people coming to see this performance?
It's interesting that you bring up the conversational part of the show, because we do open the lines of communication between audience and artists within the Still Inspired performance. And we get a lot of feedback post-show about how much people appreciate the fact that we sit down and we give a little insight to the audience on what both the visual artists and then therefore what the choreographer takes from that and how they create their work. Ironically, I get a lot of audience members who say, they feel stupid after watching or seeing a show or looking at a painting, and they wish they had more information. And I know a lot of it is, subject to the eye of the beholder. What do you get from it? Right. What do you feel from it? But, I had no idea how many audience members were going to actually appreciate the fact that we let them in a little bit more and let them know kind of how our process started and how we got to where the performance is at that point in time. So that's, I think, one of the biggest bits of feedback that we get from audience members is that they appreciate that. And they appreciate the opportunity to ask questions at the end of the show too. So, and even, sometimes they tell us some of their feedback as well, what they thought it meant. And it's not always the same thing that we were intending or that a visual artist is intending, but likewise, everything is very interesting, regardless of whether or not it was from the original thought of the artist,
Right.
So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we get.
That's wonderful. That's awesome. And as far as then your selection process when it comes to the visual artists, because every year you select a different visual artist. So maybe if you can tell us some of the artists that you have worked with in the past, and what is that process of what do you look for in the artists that you are going to be working with? What are some of the, what kind of interests you when you're looking for an artist?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I think it's kind of hard to know until you see it, to be honest with you. I think in our first season, we were still, I think, trying to figure out what this show is and what the format was going to be. We had 4 different choreographers, and we also had 4 different visual artists, which I think was really neat. But the show has evolved now into having 4 different choreographers feature the work of one visual artist, which I think is great because it also gives our visual artist a little bit more exposure, and it also allows us to have that conversation more with just the one visual artist. So anyway, some of the artists that we've worked with in the past, our first season featuring 4 different visual artists. I myself used Sam Kirk's work called Foundation for the first series, and Sam Kirk is local here to Chicago. I believe she commutes back and forth, though, to do work in Chicago and New York, if I'm right.
That's correct. Yeah, she still does that.
And her work was just fantastic, and she was great to work with. We also had a featured photographer from that first year. Her name was Rebecca Plotnick. She does a lot of work in Paris and in Chicago. Another featured artist was Anna Zanuck. And the fourth choreographer, you know Anna. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes.
And the fourth one that we used in that first season, oh, forgive me, I'm blanking out. Nope. Okay, it's Rebecca Moy, and she's also here from Chicago. So, which I think it was great that first season. We didn't actually have any of the speaking in between seeing each of the dance pieces. So we layered in the idea of featuring one artist for our second season. And that artist, while she was local here to Chicago, she does travel a bit. And I'm not quite sure actually where she's landed right now. Her name is Lydia Larson. And she has some really interesting work that we were able to pick 4 different pieces of hers for. Our third season was Eleanor Spies-Ferris, who is local here to Chicago, and I know she's also a teacher in Evanston.
Wonderful artist, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And our fourth featured visual artist is you.
That's right. And that's how we got in touch, and that's how this whole conversation started, right? Because you sent me an email invitation, and I remember reading it, and I couldn't figure out exactly what this was about, right? And we talked a little bit about this the other day, and then you went on again and contacted me again. It's like, oh, okay, Tina started to make sense, and what a great and pleasant surprise. I was able to go and see some of the rehearsals. That was just fascinating. For me, just sitting and looking at the interpretation of the work and how you see it with your eyes and through your own art form, contributing to it, right? So giving an extension to the meaning of that piece. So that in itself, the act that another artist comes and gets involved with the piece at this point in time, for me, it's an extension to the meaning of the piece. Therefore, for me at least, the work is still more interesting than when I finished it, if I can say it in those terms, where it's taking another extension of what I thought it was done. Maybe it wasn't done. Maybe it needed this part, this performance happening, with it to really bring it to completion in a strange way.
That's interesting. I think choreographers sort of think along those lines with their work too. It's never finished. You can look at it and you can always think, oh, I should have done this, or oh, I could tweak that. And,
right.
At some point you have to put it down and say it's done and it's ready to present. And I think many choreographers relate to the idea that they wish they had more time, or they want to fix this part or do something there. Yeah.
Exactly. So in this case, we're working with 4 pieces, 4 paintings that you have selected to work with the 4 choreographers. And then so each choreographer gets to work with a team of dancers, correct? And so tell me a little bit about the process, because I'm very familiar with the process of an artist working in the studio, right? Because that's what I do, and I work with so many artists from around the world. So I have that a very strong understanding of process on the visual art. How does the process happen with a choreographer? So you have the visual, then where do you start, I guess, and how does that become a finished piece?
Sure. Well, the start of all of it begins obviously with who are going to be the 4 featured choreographers for the season. And we've had a lot of returning choreographers and same choreographers. Ironically, we've had 2 choreographers move, one out of state and one out of the country. So, people's lives evolve, and we find ourselves needing new choreographers occasionally from season to season. We actually have the same group of dancers that we have had since 2015, Still Inspired. And we found the majority of those dancers through an audition. And an audition is something that, we would host and we would present and put out information and promotional materials for as a call for dancers to come to an audition. So, and then once we found, our group through that of dancers, we've been lucky enough to have the majority of them continue to return season after season of Still Inspired. So the dancers that you will see in the show on February 2nd and 3rd are the dancers that we have had since 2015. One of them has been with the program since 2013. So we've been lucky. We've kind of had a little family develop within this show of same people, and they're fantastic. But that's usually in the world of dance. That's how dancers are sort of found for this creation of these productions and performances, is through an audition. So once we find our visual artist and we get the okay to use the work, which, as you know, that can be kind of a funny process on our side. Most people don't think that we're a real thing when we send out emails. I've heard many visual artists say, "Oh, we thought you were spam." So once we kind of get through that door and we all agree that we're all very inspired by this work, we want to work with this visual artist. So once we get the okay, we then sort of sift through all of the works. And some choreographers can't decide between 2 or 3 or 4 different pieces. They're all so interesting, and it's hard for us to make a decision sometimes. So usually what we'll do is we'll have a line of communication with our visual artist and say, can you give me a little bit more insight about this particular work? And you probably remember that email with sending the list of paintings that we were narrowing down. Right. And then you let us in however much you choose, and that kind of helps us sometimes narrow it down even further. And at that point, each of the 4 choreographers are working independently. They're choosing their own painting, and then they're choosing their own cast. So we have 8 dancers. So you choose from those 8 dancers. Sometimes it has to do with choosing the cast. Can ultimately have to do with your painting of choice that it gets chosen. For example, the piece that I'm going to be doing in this season, Still Inspired Connections, is inspired by one of your paintings called Subconscious Conversations, which has 2 figures within the one. And for me, it's one of my, I just immediately yelled duet.
Okay. And it's one of my most mysterious pieces, actually. Which is really? Kind of, there's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of dark elements. It's quite of a, it's kind of a mysterious piece. So I was really excited that you selected that one.
Well, and I think I kept it along those lines because it's got that deep red and orange and black coloring, and that really connected me with a lot of anxious, unresolved answers in my own life, and my own inner conflict. So anyway, this little dialogue that we're having now happens between all 4 of these choreographers in the painting that they choose. And usually at that point, we have our rehearsal schedule and our cast submitted to all of our dancers, and they give us the okay, this works for us. And if it doesn't, sometimes there's shuffling around and scheduling. Once we get everything sort of nailed down in place, then we begin the process. And that's all sort of subject, again, to how the choreographer works, because everybody independently works at that point in time until we start bringing the show together just a few weeks before the performance.
That's fascinating. That's fabulous. And then that brings us to the point where we are just about a week away from actually having this performance, which is awesome. So why don't we invite our friends to let's give them some of the details of where they can come and see. There's going to be only 2 live performances happening, one on February 2nd and the other one on February 3rd. And I will be there, and you'll be there, and all the dancers will be there. We have a beautiful audience as well taking part of this. There will be the dance, there will be the art projection, there will be a conversation that will take place between all of us as well. And where is this place? Can you tell us where is it going to take place, and where can we go and find tickets for the event?
Sure. It's at a venue called Dovetail Dance Studios, and the address is 2853 West Montrose Avenue in Chicago. And you can go to our website, actually, to buy tickets. Our website is www.stillinspireddance.com. You'll see the tabs at the top for the menus. You can click on performances, and you should be able to buy your tickets right there.
Awesome. Fabulous. And you have an Instagram, and you are at Still That Inspired, right? Is that what the actual
Correct.
address?
Yes.
Awesome. And so people can also, our friends can go there and find out, look at some of the previews. You've been putting some pictures of what's coming and that kind of thing, so they can follow up close this performance. And definitely, if you're in the city of Chicago, we invite you to come and check it out. It's going to be really awesome. Definitely, you have to get your tickets ahead of time. There's limited seating, so make sure you plan ahead and you reserve your seats and check those out as well. So Laura, as we kind of start to wrap it up for this, and hopefully we'll have some of our friends come and check it out as well. Let's talk a little bit about the future. Where do you envision this project to do in the future?
That's a really great question. I think I consider the show still in its baby stages, being that this is only our fourth production, and it is currently independently produced. So in its future, I would love to continue to grow our audience and gain more support for both visual artists and our incredible group of dancers and choreographers that we have. And in terms of growing for dance, I think it would be great to stay in Chicago and really feature our Chicago artists and our Chicago choreographers. That's not to say if we ever got the opportunity to go perform elsewhere, we would absolutely try to bring this work to other cities. But I think it's important to keep it based on our home roots here in Chicago. I think it's something that we strive to do, and I think it's just going to kind of be year to year. We'll see how much it grows and see if we can gain more audience and appreciation for what we do.
Fabulous. Well, I think this is really a great project that you have started. I think, I really want to congratulate you for doing this and for the effort, the energy that you're putting on this. Definitely working with you, I can feel that you're putting all your heart into it. And this is not just a side thing, but this is something that you're passionate about, that you really believe on. And it shows, just by working with you up close and personal on this particular project. So we wish you a lot of success through it. I think it's a great way to connect the visual arts and the performance arts. Not that they are separated, but sometimes we are doing our own thing, right? And what a great time when we can actually, work hand in hand, do projects together, collaborate with each other, and reach each other's understanding of what we do as artists, on whatever medium that we choose to work with, and really enrich each other's lives through this programming and through these projects, and then also the people that come to be part of this as well. So again, thank you, Laura, for all you're doing. Thank you to all the choreographers that are working with you, and all the dancers and the people that work behind the scenes, right? The lighting and the management and all those other things that we don't see, but who make it all happen and possible as well. So
absolutely. Thank you so much, Sergio. This has been great. I'm very excited to present our fourth season, especially inspired by your works. I think it's going to be fantastic. And I really appreciate your time in interviewing us and getting the word out about our show a little bit more. It's been fantastic.
Absolutely. So how can some of our artist friends who are listening right now, who may be interested in this project to be considered for the future performance, to be a selected artist, how can they contact you and maybe send you their website or their Instagram account so that you can look at their work for future performances?
Sure. We do have a contact page on our website. It's www.stillinspireddance.com. And if you look at the menu, you will see the Contact Us selection at the top. And that would be a great way to reach out to us and send some work over. We would love to look at other places of inspiration for future seasons. That would be great.
That's awesome, Laura. Thank you so much for being part of this podcast. We had a great conversation. I'm really looking forward to the event next week. And thanks again for all you do. And I want to thank everyone who's listening to this podcast, of course. Also, share with your friends. If you're here in the city of Chicago, we hope to see you at Still Inspired this coming February 2nd or February 3rd. So thanks again, and I will see you at the next level.
Check out our website at www.theartistnextlevel.com, where you will find our podcast library, learn about our upcoming webinars, find resources relevant to your career, and much more. Thanks for listening to today's podcast, and we'll see you at the next level.